Pirates. Just saying the word makes your brain yell, "Arr!" and start imagining sword fights, treasure maps, parrots screaming profanities. But guess what? Almost everything you think you know about pirates is pure movie-made nonsense. So today we're exposing 44 of the dumbest, weirdest, most hilariously wrong pirate myths that Hollywood made you believe. Prepare to laugh, wince, and never look at a peg leg the same way again. 1. Pirates yelling, "Arr!" every 5 seconds is like imagining all Americans constantly shout, "Howdy!" with a cheeseburger in each hand. That famous pirate accent? A total accident. One British actor in the 1950s just went full angry potato farmer in a movie, and now every pirate sounds like your uncle having a stroke during karaoke. In reality, pirates were a global mess. Africans, Arabs, Greeks, ex-soldiers, runaway slaves. If you screamed AR on a real pirate ship, someone would either stab you or offer you medical help. That accent didn't conquer the seas, it conquered Halloween stores. 2. Captain Jack Sparrow walks like he's trying to sneak past a sleeping goose while also avoiding wet socks. But somehow, movies convinced us this guy is peak historical accuracy. In real life, a pirate acting like Jack would have been shoved in a barrel and launched at the next island. Real pirate captains weren't eyeliner-wearing fashion icons. They were brutal, practical, and definitely not drunk flirting their way through sea battles. Jack Sparrow is fun because he's what happens when Keith Richards and a spaghetti noodle have a child and send it to sea. 3. Everyone thinks pirates wore eye patches because of epic sword fights or cannonball-related eye loss. That's cute. But the truth is even weirder. Some sailors actually used eye patches to switch between daylight and darkness faster. Yup, they were literally toggling night vision mode before it was cool. One eye for the sun, one eye for dark ship guts. Imagine being in a battle, flipping your patch like, "Time to go dark, boys," while your enemy wonders why you look like a pirate-themed Power Ranger. It's clever, but also sounds like a myth made up by a guy who lost a bar bet. 4. Ah yes, the classic pirate starter pack. 1 cutlass, 1 bottle of rum, and 1 peg leg made from a suspiciously straight chair leg. Movies make it look like every third pirate was hopping around like a discount table. But here's the thing. Wooden legs and hook hands weren't just rare, they were a straight-up death sentence on a ship. Try climbing rigging or sprinting during a naval chase with a glorified broomstick strapped to your hip. Real pirates didn't have time for prosthetic fashion statements. Most who lost a limb got a one-way ticket to buried at sea. The only hook hands you'll see often are in cartoons and at theme parks. And even there, they're mostly for scratching backs or opening snack bags. 5. Parrots. Because nothing says deadly ocean criminal like a neon-colored feathered toddler screaming insults on your shoulder. Hollywood insists pirates were basically tropical Dr. Doolittles, each with their own foul-mouthed bird yelling, "Pieces of 8" every 5 minutes. But real pirate ships weren't petting zoos. They were disease-ridden, rat-infested chaos boats. Feeding a parrot fresh fruit while the crew fights over moldy biscuits? Bold choice. Also, parrots bite. A lot. And loudly. The whole idea came from Treasure Island, because apparently one author decided pirates needed some Disney flair. In real life, your average pirate was more likely to keep a knife in his boot than a bird in his beard. 6. The skull and crossbones flag, the Jolly Roger, is basically the pirate logo. Slap it on a t-shirt, a mug, a baby onesie. But here's the twist. Real pirate flags were like medieval horror shows designed by unhinged graphic designers. Skeletons stabbing hearts, hourglasses leaking blood, flaming swords. Some just went with solid red, which meant no negotiations. We're here to ruin your entire Tuesday. The idea that every pirate flew a neat little skull on a black background is like assuming all bikers wear matching uniforms. Pirates weren't building brands. They were trying to make sailors wet themselves before the cannons even fired. 7. Picture this. A pirate ship sailing proudly with the Jolly Roger flapping in the wind, announcing, Attention! We are 100% criminals. Yeah, that never happened. Real pirates were sneaky little gremlins of the sea. They used friendly flags, Spanish, Dutch, British, anything to get close without suspicion. Then, at the last second, boom. Out comes the skull flag like it's a jump scare in a horror movie. That's not branding, that's emotional terrorism. Sailing into battle with your pirate flag already flying would be like robbing a bank while wearing a t-shirt that says, "Hi, I'm the robber." Pirates didn't want a fair fight. They wanted panic, confusion, and ideally for their victims to surrender while still holding their lunch. 8. Let's talk about the pirate bling. Movies would have you believe that pirates wore gold hoop earrings for mystical reasons. Better eyesight, balance, maybe even psychic powers. Like, what is this, nautical Hogwarts? In reality, the earrings were less fashion statement and more DIY funeral fund. Sailors wore gold in case they died and washed up somewhere sketchy, so locals could pay for a halfway decent burial. That's right, pirates were literally wearing emergency death money on their heads. Which, honestly, is kind of genius. But the whole, they wore them for vision thing, please? If pirates really believed that, every one of them would have been walking around with golden nose rings, toe rings, and a monocle made of diamonds. 9. Walking the plank. The go-to pirate punishment in every movie ever. But here's the real shocker. It almost never happened. It's basically a Hollywood invention, like laser sounds in space or functional high heels in action scenes. Real pirates weren't setting up DIY diving boards just to be dramatic. If they wanted you gone, they'd stab you, shoot you, or just toss you into sharky waters with zero ceremony. Walking the plank was way too theatrical. It's like assuming every medieval king made announcements via fireworks show. It's a myth that stuck because it looks cool on screen, but in real life, pirates didn't have time for slow-motion executions. This wasn't Broadway. It was floating chaos. 10. Movies convinced us pirates were treasure-obsessed squirrels, burying gold under palm trees and drawing cartoon maps with a big red X. But actual pirates spent their loot faster than your cousin after a tax refund. Burying treasure? That's what you do when you plan to come back. Pirates had no intention of returning. They were too busy getting drunk, fleeing the Navy, or dying dramatically. The whole X marks the spot thing came from fiction, specifically Treasure Island. Real pirates didn't need maps. Their plan was simple: steal stuff, spend it stupidly, repeat. The only map they used was, where's the nearest tavern and how many teeth do I need to get served? 11. Ah yes, the legendary pirate code. A sacred, unbreakable document that all pirates followed like it was the 10 Commandments of crime. Except, nope. There wasn't one pirate code, there were dozens. Each crew made up their own rules, often scribbled on the back of whatever paper wasn't soaked in rum. Some included democratic voting, shared loot, and even compensation for lost limbs. It was less divine law and more tipsy group chat with consequences. So when a movie says, they broke the code, just know the real response would have been, which one? Ours? Steve changed it last week because he lost at cards. 12. Keelhauling sounds like something invented by a metal band. And honestly, it kind of was. The myth says pirates loved tying people to ropes and dragging them under the boat to get barnacles scraped like a human cheese grater. Brutal, right? But it was actually super rare, mostly a punishment in official navies, not pirate crews. Why? Because it's complicated, takes forever to set up, and spoiler alert, the person usually dies before learning their lesson. Pirates preferred quicker methods, like a bullet, or just pushing someone off the ship mid-sentence. Keelhauling was less of a punishment and more of a medieval loading screen. 13. Marooning in movies always looks the same. One sad pirate, one tiny island, one dramatic palm tree, and maybe a friendly crab who teaches him life lessons. But in reality, being marooned just meant being dumped on any godforsaken patch of land. A swamp, a barren rock, a beach full of things that want to bite you. And that famous pistol with a single bullet they'd leave you with? That wasn't an act of mercy for hunting. It was the ultimate grim suggestion. A final, terrible solution for when counting sand grains and arguing with seagulls finally lost its charm. Disney definitely didn't put that scene in its theme park ride. 14. You hear booty, and your brain immediately screams gold coins and jewel-encrusted chalices. But real pirate booty was underwhelming. Rope, sails, flour, spices, and sometimes literal barrels of fish guts. Pirates weren't obsessed with riches. They wanted anything they could use, trade, or eat without dying. The idea that every raid ended with a velvet-lined chest of treasure is pure cinematic fantasy. Most pirate raids were basically floating grocery store robberies. The only treasure was staying alive long enough to eat something not covered in mold. Not glamorous, but hey, nothing screams adventure like stealing a barrel of pickled cabbage. 15. Every pirate movie shows grog and rum like it was the official pirate hydration program. But no, pirates weren't just permanently hammered. On duty, sobriety was key, because nothing ruins a robbery like falling off the ship mid-swing. Pirates did drink, sure, but mostly after raids, or while pretending their infected toe wasn't turning green. Grog wasn't some magical party juice. It was watered-down booze, with citrus thrown in to fight off scurvy. So when movies show pirates pounding rum like frat boys at spring break, remember, the real guys were just trying not to die of vitamin deficiency. Party responsibly or lose your leg. Those were the vibes. 16. Sword fights in pirate movies are like choreographed dance numbers with extra shouting. Elegant lunges, witty banter, maybe a backflip or two. Reality check? Real pirate combat was the opposite of sexy. It was chaos, sweat, screaming, and whoever hit first with a rusty axe. Nobody cared about form. They cared about not dying. Half the time, they just threw whatever they could grab. Fighting on a ship's deck while it's rocking like a drunken seesaw? Try doing your fancy fencing when the floor is trying to slap your face. Pirate battles weren't duels. They were violent mosh pits with extra splinters. 17. Hollywood loves showing pirates on these giant, majestic galleons with 500 cannons and room for a ballroom dance. But actual pirates avoided big ships like toddlers avoid broccoli. Why? Because big ships were slow, hard to hide, and needed a literal army to operate. Pirates preferred nimble little sloops that could zip in, rob you blind, and disappear before your captain even finished yelling, "Is that a..." Big ships were floating targets. Small ships were speed demons. So next time a movie shows pirates parking a sea castle in front of a fort, just imagine them trying to parallel park a whale. 18. Cannons firing in slow motion, ships exploding, wood flying everywhere. Peak pirate drama, right? But here's the awkward truth. Pirates didn't want to blow ships up. They wanted the stuff inside. Cannons were mostly used as scary noisemakers. Fire a few shots, yell like lunatics, wave a creepy flag, and hope the merchant crew surrenders before anything valuable gets destroyed. Sinking a ship was like burning down a grocery store before you finish shopping. It happened, but only when things went horribly off script. The real pirate motto was more scare and steal than boom and sink. 19. In movies, pirate captains act like sea gods with mood swings. They bark orders, throw people overboard for sneezing, and hold all the power. In real life, pirate captains were more like middle managers with a sword. They were elected, and if they annoyed the crew, they could be voted out or even marooned. The real muscle on a pirate ship was the quartermaster, the guy who handled loot, discipline, and all the arguments about who stole whose rum. Pirate life was surprisingly democratic, which is weird when you consider they also stabbed people for snoring too loudly. 20. Every pirate ship in the movies has that epic wooden steering wheel. You know, the one that's bigger than the captain's torso and spins dramatically during storms. But those wheels didn't even exist on most pirate ships. Real pirates use tillers or whipstaffs, which are less nautical epicness and more weird stick attached to a heavy rope. It's like expecting a sports car and getting a glorified canoe paddle. So when the captain dramatically spins the wheel in a storm, just remember, he'd probably be holding a stick, swearing loudly, and trying not to fall into a barrel of fish guts. 21. Hollywood pirates always seem to be battling the mighty Royal Navy in some epic high seas showdown. Cannonballs, insults, heroic deaths, the works. But actual pirates avoided Navy ships like you avoid eye contact with a gym trainer. They went for slow, fat merchant ships full of sugar, spices, or something vaguely expensive. Fighting the Royal Navy was a great way to get sunk, arrested, or turned into a warning poster. Pirates weren't suicidal maniacs. They were lazy geniuses. Why fight trained soldiers when you can rob a guy hauling pineapples with no gun and a bad knee? 22. And of course, what pirate adventure is complete without kidnapping the governor's beautiful daughter? It's in like every third movie. But guess what? Pirates weren't casting their raids like a rom-com. They kidnapped whoever looked most likely to bring ransom. Rich dudes, ship captains, sometimes even the ship's cargo if it looked fancy enough. If a governor's daughter did get captured, it was usually by accident, and she definitely wasn't falling in love with her captor during a musical montage. Pirates wanted gold, not girlfriends. If they wanted drama, they'd just start a fistfight over who gets the hammock near the breeze. 23. Let's settle this once and for all. Not all pirates were dudes. In fact, some of the baddest pirates in history were women who didn't just sail with the boys, they ran the whole show. Ever heard of Qing Shi? She commanded an entire pirate empire in China, with a fleet so massive it made the British Navy nervous. Anne Bonny and Mary Red were out here sword-fighting grown men in wigs while dressed like they were on a business murder trip. But movies still act like the ocean rejected ovaries. If you ask Hollywood, the only woman on a pirate ship is either kidnapped, singing, or in love with Johnny Depp. History says otherwise. 24. Somewhere along the way, someone decided all pirates were illiterate grunts who could barely spell booty without a cheat sheet. But here's the thing. Many pirates were clever, literate, and ran their ships with more organization than a modern tech startup. Some kept journals, wrote detailed ship rules, and even negotiated treaties. Bartholomew Roberts had a dress code, for crying out loud. These guys weren't dumb. They were just criminal entrepreneurs with better hats. So if you imagine pirates as grunting brutes who thought reading was witchcraft, you're mistaking them for bad action movie extras, not sea thieves with spreadsheets. 25. Pirates were a rainbow of chaos. Movies show them as sweaty Europeans yelling in bad Cockney accents, but real pirate crews were basically floating versions of the United Nations, minus the diplomacy. Africans, Arabs, Caribbeans, escaped slaves, poor farmers, and disgruntled Navy men all teamed up to rob the high seas. The only requirement was, are you mad enough to board a ship with questionable hygiene and constant sword threats? If yes, welcome aboard. Saying pirates were all white is like saying all rock bands wear the same leather jacket. Spoiler, they didn't, and neither did pirates. 26. Blackbeard gets all the press. He's on t-shirts, tattoos, overpriced rum bottles. The man's a legend. But was he the most successful pirate ever? Not even close. That title goes to Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts, who captured over 400 ships, wore a red feathered hat, and basically treated piracy like a hostile takeover with branding. Meanwhile, Blackbeard mostly relied on his terrifying look. Slow-burning fuses in his beard, wild eyes, and a fashion sense best described as evil wizard meets swamp lumberjack. He was scary, sure, but Black Bart was the corporate shark of piracy, and no one talks about him because he didn't cosplay as Satan on casual Fridays. 27. Speaking of flaming beards, yes, Blackbeard did sometimes put lit fuses under his hat to scare people, but the idea that he was just walking around on fire 24/7 like some nautical ghost rider is hilarious. He wasn't insane. He was marketing. The man knew how to make an entrance. You roll up to a ship with smoke pouring out of your face and people just assume you're possessed. But he didn't do it every day. Have you ever tried lighting explosives near your face in the wind? It's not intimidation tactic, it's accidental barbecue. He was scary, not suicidal. 28. Pirates hated rules, right? They were rebels, free spirits, chaos on a boat. Yeah. No. Pirates had more rules than a middle school cafeteria. They had codes of conduct, voting systems, punishment guidelines. Some even had rules about when you could play music or gamble. It wasn't a floating anarchy. It was democracy with scurvy. You break the rules? Say goodbye to your share of the loot or your hammock. Pirates didn't just stab each other for fun. They held meetings about it first. Hollywood shows chaos. History shows group project energy with swords. 29. Ever heard someone use pirate and privateer like they're interchangeable? Like saying burglar and licensed home inspector mean the same thing. Not quite. Pirates stole from everyone. Privateers stole for their government. Basically pirates with paperwork. Buccaneers? Mostly Caribbean-based pirate freelancers who really hated the Spanish. So lumping them all together is like confusing chefs, caterers, and that guy who steals muffins from hotel buffets. They're all stealing food, but the intent and paperwork matters. Hollywood mashes them up because freelance ocean criminal doesn't fit on a poster. 30. Pirates weren't always in it for life. For many, piracy was just a temporary career move between starving and getting hanged. Some were ex-Navy, others were ex-farmers who got sick of chickens. If you got captured, maybe you joined the crew instead of dying, like a deadly internship. And if you got rich, you disappeared, changed your name, and bought a tavern in a town that didn't ask questions. Movies act like every pirate was born under a full moon, with a sword in one hand and a mug of rum in the other. But for many, piracy was just a really intense gap year. 31. Here's the feel-good myth of the decade. Pirates were secretly abolitionist heroes, freeing slaves and fighting injustice. Sounds amazing. Also, nope. Reality is complicated. Yes, escaped slaves sometimes found freedom on pirate ships, because pirates didn't care who you were as long as you could swing a sword and didn't snore too loud. But pirates also captured and sold slaves like everyone else because money. The sea didn't erase racism, it just gave it new outfits. So no, pirates weren't woke Robin Hoods. They were more like morally confused raccoons with cannons. 32. Movies love showing pirates on ships the size of floating castles, rows of cannons, dance floors, and probably a Starbucks below deck. But real pirates weren't sailing Titanic. They needed speed, agility, and the ability to turn faster than a guilty toddler. Giant ships were slow, expensive, and screamed, "Please catch me!" Pirates used little sloops and schooners that could zip in, steal everything, and vanish like they had invisibility cloaks. If you tried to rob people in a floating mansion, you'd get wrecked before you could say, "Hoist the mainsail." Real pirates weren't captains, they were getaway drivers with trust issues. 33. Epic cannon duels. Exploding ships. Debris flying dramatically as pirates yell things like, "Fire at will." Movies make pirate battles look like sea-based Fast and Furious. But cannonballs were expensive, hard to aim, and terrible for your loot. Pirates didn't want to destroy ships. They wanted to steal the cargo without turning it into driftwood. Most battles involved a few warning shots, a scary flag, and a lot of panicked surrendering. Real pirates weren't action heroes. They were lazy geniuses who realized it's easier to scare people into giving up than to rebuild your ship every Tuesday. 34. Sword fights on pirate ships in movies look like fencing tournaments with better costumes. Pirates spin, flip, parry, like they trained at ballet school and murder academy. But real fights were basically street brawls with saltwater. There were no rules, no honor, and definitely no choreography. You grabbed whatever wasn't nailed down, a bottle, a spoon, maybe a disgruntled crab, and hoped for the best. Graceful duels? Try slipping on seaweed while dodging a chair. If anyone did a backflip in a pirate fight, it was because they got punched in the legs and fell overboard. 35. Pirates going toe-to-toe with the mighty Royal Navy makes for great cinema. But dumb strategy. Navy ships were full of trained killers, heavy artillery, and strict rules about personal hygiene. Pirates were scrappy gamblers with questionable dental records. They avoided naval ships like cats avoid bathtubs. Pirates hunted weak, slow, juicy merchant ships, floating piggy banks with zero fight in them. Going after the Royal Navy was career-ending, like robbing a police station because you're feeling brave. Pirates weren't brave. They were practical, sneaky, and had zero interest in being cannonball confetti. 36. Kidnapping the governor's daughter. Classic. It's in every movie. Handsome pirate, fancy dress, a romantic sword fight, maybe a kiss in a thunderstorm. But real pirates didn't have time for royal romance. They kidnapped whoever had a wallet. Cargo, captains, random rich dudes. If you could be ransomed, congratulations. You're cargo now. A governor's daughter on board was more like logistical nightmare than love interest. Feeding her, protecting her, dealing with emotional meltdowns during storms. Nah. Pirates weren't looking for drama. They were looking for people who came with bags of gold, not complicated love arcs. 37. Secret island hideouts. Pirate utopias. Tortuga-style bars where nobody wears pants and everyone's a bartender. Movies love this. But the truth? Most pirate towns were just regular ports looking the other way in exchange for bribes. No wild pirate paradise, no secret fortresses. Just dusty coastal towns with too many goats and one drunk mayor. Sure, some places like Nassau got pirate heavy, but even then there were rules, taxes, and the occasional angry navy ship. So unless your definition of pirate hideout is drunken, overcrowded fishing village with excellent gossip, prepare to be disappointed. 38. Voodoo curses, skeleton crews, magical compasses that point to desire. Pirates in movies are basically Hogwarts dropouts, but in reality, pirates were superstitious, sure, but not magical. They avoided bananas on ships, feared whistling, and believed in bad omens like sailors named Bob, who looked too confident. But they weren't casting spells. All that voodoo stuff was added later, mostly by writers thinking, what if pirates? But spooky. Real pirate problems were scurvy, mutiny, and food that smelled like regret, not cursed medallions and zombie monkeys. 39. Ever heard someone call any sea criminal a pirate? Wrong. Privateers were pirates with permission slips. Literal government paperwork saying, go rob people, but only those people. Buccaneers were a whole different crew, often based in the Caribbean, who hated the Spanish and loved smoking meat. And pirates? They robbed everyone and answered to no one. It's like confusing hitmen, bounty hunters, and mall cops. All dangerous, but wildly different vibes. Movies smush them together because buccaneer with complex legal status doesn't test well with audiences. 40. Let's get this straight. Pirates were not historical Batman villains fighting slavery with swords and sass. Yes, some ships had escaped slaves as crew members because pirates didn't care who you were if you could stab and swab. But many pirates also trafficked slaves for profit. Harsh truth, but there it is. They weren't freedom fighters. They were profit chasers. If something was valuable and portable, it got sold. Pirates were chaotic, immoral entrepreneurs, not woke warriors with parrots and a purpose. If you want abolitionist heroes, try Frederick Douglass, not Captain Scurvyface. 41. Dead men tell no tales. Cool line, great marketing, totally fictional. Pirates didn't whisper that before pushing people off planks. The phrase comes from books and eventually Disney, not actual salty dogs. Real pirates didn't bother with poetic one-liners. They yelled stuff like, "Grab the rum," or "Where's my other boot?" Not rehearsed catchphrases. If dead men really told no tales, the entire genre of pirate history books would just be 400 pages of silence. Catchy? Yes. Historically accurate? About as real as a mermaid with a resume. 42. Flying the Jolly Roger all the time would be like driving around with a giant "I steal stuff" flag taped to your roof. Pirates were smarter than that. They used fake flags, Dutch, British, even Spanish, to get close without raising alarm. Only when it was time to strike did they hoist the skull and bones. It was the original bait and scare tactic. Constantly flying, it would have been like yelling, "Free muggings here," while knocking on people's doors. Pirates were chaotic, not stupid. Well, mostly. 43. Bar brawls. Tankards flying. Someone gets smashed through a table while dramatic music plays. Pirate taverns in movies are basically 18th century WWE. In real life, pirates wanted shore leave to relax, drink, eat, and maybe not die for a few days. Brawls did happen, sure, but not every 10 minutes like in Hollywood. Getting arrested ruined everyone's party, and most pirates didn't want to fight a guy named Meatbeard over the last sausage. They had enough chaos at sea. On land, they just wanted beer, a bed, and ideally, no one throwing chairs. 44. And finally, the ultimate movie convenience. Hungry sharks that magically appear the second someone falls overboard. Movies treat sharks like loyal, seafaring puppies of death, just waiting for a snack. Reality check. Sharks don't follow ships for hundreds of miles on the off chance someone walks the plank. They have their own lives, their own migratory patterns, and they're definitely not on the pirate payroll. A person falling into the open ocean was far more likely to die from drowning, exposure, or sheer boredom than to be instantly devoured in a dramatic Jaws-style scene. The only thing reliably following a pirate ship was the smell. So next time someone says "Arr" while waving a fake sword, just smile, because now you know the truth. Pirates weren't magical, fashionable, treasure-burying lunatics. They were chaotic, practical, occasionally disgusting sea hustlers with surprisingly democratic vibes. Which myth shocked you the most? Or which one do you still kind of wish was true? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more historical nonsense.